islands of Banda is truly the best example of Indonesia's lush and fertile biodiversity, rich and plentiful history, and its beautiful beaches. In the many thousands of islands that lay scattered in the country, the Banda Islands has its roots in the lucrative spice trade in the age of exploration. Located in the Maluku archipelago, the geographic isolation of the island gives itself a sense of peace and calm. Yet, an indescribable urge of excitement and wonder that can only be cured with a sense of adventure that empowered those who are determined to find out the truth. In this vlog series, I will be uncovering what lies underneath the mentioned Spice Islands that for so long garnered the excitement of past explorers, and see for myself what the Spice Islands itself has to offer. We start our journey in Ambon, which is the capital city of the region of Maluku, as it is the only possible way to get to Bandanera. And so from Ambon, there are two possible options in order to get there, which is by getting a ferry ride or flying an aircraft that could only fit 12 passengers. Obviously, we chose using a light aircraft as it can travel there in just about 45 minutes, whereas it would take almost 6 hours to get there from a ferry ride.
Alright, so right now we're gonna be departing for Banda, and as you can see, the plane's right behind me. And just from the looks of it, it looks pretty much really small, and that's because it can only fit 12 passengers. And so we have to measure our body weight, and as well as the luggage and the cabin and everything. And so yeah, the maximum is 20 kilograms for the cabin baggages, and as for our weights, it has to be measured, and if it exceeds, well, there has to be some things left behind. Luckily, we don't have anything left behind, so that's really good for us.
After a 45-minute flight from Patimura International, we reached Bandanera's airstrip at around 11 a.m. Immediately after that, we rode a motorcycle in order to get to the hotel. It's important to note that motorcycle is the main source of transportation instead of the usual cars you'd see in Jakarta. Once we reached Molana Hotel, we were immediately welcomed with a stunning view of the mountain. As well as that, it was bordered by a gulf of clear blue water of the ocean, which connects to the harbors and surrounding ports. Since the day has just begun, obviously we began the journey as soon as we checked in. The first objective was to explore and analyze the inner parts of the surrounding areas, looking for anything interesting not found elsewhere in Indonesia. We then visited Banda's museum, which included a variety of collections and historical objects which were left on the island. My guide then told me an interesting story of the Dutch conquest of the Banda Islands, which took place in 1621. It was a conquest which was aimed on instating monopoly over the trade over nutmeg. Oh, and they kept an accordion for some reason, and it's ancient, so why the hell not?
This fort right here is the old Church of Nera. It was built in 1873 by the Dutch. It was after the era of the VOC. But what's interesting is that right now the population of Bandanera is actually 90% Muslim and only 10% Christian. But the Banda government, they kept this church in pristine condition, and actually opens it every Sunday, and if a Christian wants to pray. And so yeah, it's still in pristine condition since 1873.
We then visited a fort named Fort Nassau. It was a Portuguese fort and it was captured by the Dutch. It was renamed Nassau after the House of Orange Nassau.
So right now, I'm at the bridge that connects the land and Fort Nassau. So what you're seeing here is the ruins of Fort Nassau. So the Fort Nassau, it was actually created by the Portuguese and not the Dutch. And so what you're seeing here is the ruins of the canal. Because back then, what the Dutch did is that they actually renovated the fort and created a canal system that connects the fort, the city, and the sea. And so it basically creates source of fresh water for the people and also for supplies for the fort.
Fort Nassau's foundations are originally built by the Portuguese in 1529, but due to the hostilities presented by the native people of Banda, they eventually abandoned it. The Dutch, however, finished the construction of the fort in 1609, in which they used the fort as a base of operations for their planned monopoly over the nutmeg trade.
Whilst marvelous in its size, unfortunately due to the ruins of the fort, Fort Nassau is unfortunately overshadowed by its bigger brother, Fort Belgica, which was also erected in 1611. Also, you can also see the renovations in the southern side of the wall. Yeah, as you can see there, clearly differentiating colors between that one, that over there. So, yeah, the progress of renovation is currently undergoing, but I have no idea how long it takes until it's restored. So yeah.
In order to get a better view of the fort, I had to scale up the mountains of the ruined parts of the fort. Although admittedly it was a bit dramatized, I did succeed in reaching the top of the fort, giving me quite a marvelous view of the interior complex of the fort. The huge mountain of Gunung Api Banda is also seen from the distance below.
You know, it's really funny that you can find cannons lying around everywhere in the city. This is in a road with like houses, and the thing's just right there. It's lying right over there. Cannons are everywhere in Banda.
We then visited an exile house which belonged to Muhammad Hatta, the first vice president of Indonesia. What's interesting is that many of the interior designs in the abandoned houses are shaped like the architectural design from colonial Batavia.
Look over there, lads. It's the Loch Ness Monster. Wait, isn't that a banana? Let me take a closer look. Yeah, you know, never mind. I think that's a banana.
After somehow managing to distract myself with a banana, I began my journey onto the highest peak of Banda Neira to see for myself the single greatest structure ever constructed inside the Maluku archipelago, Fort Belgica. The journey was rough, as we had to traverse small alleyways and dense jungles. Going up the hill means the journey gets tougher by the minute, but since I was using a motorcycle, it was much easier. And so finally, after much anticipation, the prized colonial heritage of the Banda Islands is finally in the reach of my own eyesights. Fort Belgica.
There it is! The gem of the East India Company. The heart and soul of the VOC. Fort Belgica, or as it's called, is a massive star fort, and it's built here in Banda Neira, overlooking the entire island and its surroundings.
This massive star fort, as they would call it in Europe, is built in the 17th century as an initiative to push Dutch explorers and merchants to to strengthen their grip in the Spice Islands, which was then largely controlled by natives, as well as rival Englishmen that controlled the island of Brunei. But in 1662, under the orders of Jan Peterson Cohen, the fort was heavily renovated and upgraded into a pentagon-shaped fort that could hold a garrison of up to 40 men. There were even further upgrades in 1672 under the orders of Lieutenant Governor Cornelis Spielman. The new design consisted of a low outer pentagon-shaped structure with 5 angled corner bastions and a higher inner pentagon with 5 tall circular towers. At the height of its architectural design, Fort Belgica might actually probably be the most strategic fort of the entire East Indies.
What's funny is that this fort kind of reminds me of the Bastille. And so, if you don't know about the Bastille, it's actually a medieval fortress. But then it was turned into gunpowder purposes, and so there were holes created for cannons, and there were less surfaces for the interiors, and more surfaces for the musketeers to shoot at. And yeah, the complexity of this reminds me of the Bastille. And if you don't know the importance of the Bastille, it was stormed at the 14th of July, 1789, beginning the French Revolution, where the revolutionaries seized control of the Bastille, which by the time it was a prison. Whereas this was actually a barracks, and so the importance of this, the strategic importance of this fort, was to overlook the basin, the lake, and every commercial activities it takes, because back then you can identify ships based on their flags, and also it has a view of the mountain right there. And what it does is that it basically also looks at possible guerrilla activities, or it also monitors the towns, because down right there you can see a lot of the towns. They can monitor that for possible insurrections, revolutions, or rebellions, or even the simplest bunch of peasantries. As for the architectural structures of this fort, so it's in the shape of a pentagon, but what it does, this pentagon shape, is basically it reinforces the front side of the fort, which has a bastion over there, and it can reinforce the left and the right sides of the bastions, can reinforce the center side of the wall at any time. This is why pentagon forts are very, very effective, unlike square forts, where if one side is destroyed, the other would have to cover it. Whereas if a center of a fort is destroyed, the left or the right could just easily block it because it's faced in the center.
Although the fort was eventually upgraded to sustain up to 400 men and up to 50 guns, at the height of the Napoleonic Wars, the British, which was then at war with the newly found Batavian Republic under Napoleon, planned an invasion of the colonies of the former Dutch Republic, which included the Banda Islands. In 1810, the British landed on the island of Banda under the command of Christopher Cole, in which I went to his quarters. Under his command, he ordered the storming of Fort Belgica, which was completed with the combined forces of the Royal Navy and the British Marine. And after months of prolonged fighting between British and Dutch forces, the impenetrable Fort Belgica finally fell to the British Army, shattering the myth of the fort's invulnerability. And soon the entire Java fell to the British rule in 1811 and remained under the British for another 3 years, until it was finally returned to the newly created Kingdom of the Netherlands under the Anglo-Dutch Treaty of 1814, which discussed the aftermath of the colonies during the Napoleonic Wars. Finally, after spending hours on end explaining remarkable stories of the fort, as the sun sets, I knew it was time to say goodbye to Fort Belgica. From all the research I've put into understanding what this fort has been into, I can safely say that it doesn't have the same feeling when you're reading than actually being there. The remarkable architectural design clearly still leaves a mark in the island even 400 years after its original creation. It truly is a gem of Indonesia's rich history. As with the sun setting, no day can truly end than with a dinner in Banda's local warungs. Nowhere else will you find such remarkable atmosphere, as all the locals go back to their peaceful homes with little to no lights, showing the calm sensation brought into the island. As a citizen from Jakarta, who has dealt with busy street traffics in the night, it truly is a sigh of relief to see the ambience presented in the island. It really goes to show the differences between the thousands of islands scattered throughout Indonesia. The Banda Islands to me is a reflection that the nation of Indonesia to Indonesians is still truly unexplored, and it is only up to the Indonesians themselves to discover their own identity.